For my second video presentation in the class Philosophy of Protest, I have decided to analyze the violent protests committed by the Irish Republican Army dating from the late 1960s to approximately 1998. The principle that the Irish Republican Army were trying to change was the constitutional status of Northern Ireland and the relationship between the Protestant Unionists of this area and the Catholic nationalists of this area. The problem for the Irish is considered to have begun when British Protestant political dominance in Ireland was ensured by the penal laws, with the backing of the British government, that the Protestants of Northern Ireland, decided they wanted to continue to be a part of the British Empire, despite the fact that the southern part of Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, had separated from the British Empire. The problem began when the Catholic minority within Northern Ireland were subjected to laws that did not give them the same rights as the Protestants that occupy the same space. Problems such as not being able to live in certain neighborhoods, not being able to participate in certain functions of the government. Now, the Irish government passed the Civil Authorities Act of Northern Ireland, and this gave, in 1922, this gave sweeping powers to the government and police to do virtually anything seen as necessary to reestablish or preserve law and order. Essentially, this gave the police of Northern Ireland the right to discriminate against Catholics because they were Catholic and because they held a different kind of sentiment against the Protestant majority. From a nationalist perspective, this continued discrimination against Catholics and proved that Northern Ireland was, in fact, corrupt. And because of this fact, the Irish Republican Army decided to violently commit acts that would, in their opinion, ensure the separation of Northern Ireland from the British Empire and reunite it with the Southern Republic of Ireland. Now, it is hard to... What I'm going to seek and try to do is justify this as an act of violent disobedience, or to try and establish it as something beyond this. Now, in his work, John Morial discusses that some thinkers like Bordeaux and Wasserstrom require an act to be nonviolent before it will even be considered an act of civil disobedience. But he does not accept this. He says that when a law is inherently immoral, can we in some way justify an act of violence? Now, before he goes into describing this more in depth, he says that the problem with civil disobedience is that thinkers often draw a line at physical violence, where they say that you can commit some kind of psychological or private violation, including trespassing on property, but you still can't commit a violent act of some kind. He finds that you cannot discriminate between an act that is violent against someone's physical body or violent against someone's property, because it is still an act of violence either way, and you are still violating someone's prima facie right to his or her body, or his or her goods, or his or her private area. So because of this, he is stating that a group like the IRA, who has been disenfranchised, or who is representing a group that has been disenfranchised, is within their right in some ways to violently protest the government of the area. Now, Martin Luther King kind of adds a little bit more depth to this, as he says, an unjust law is a code inflicted upon a minority which the minority had no part in enacting or creating, because they did not have unhampered right to vote. And this is clearly what is going on. It was going on in Northern Ireland. They were the Catholic minority being subjected to laws enacted by the British and by the Protestant majority that gave them unequal playing field. Now, Thoreau goes on to say that all men recognize the right to revolution, that is, the right to refuse allegiance to and resist the government, when its tyranny or its inefficiency are great and endurable, but almost all say that such is not the case now. What he's saying in context of his situation is that civil disobedience can only be enacted when the majority of the government's actions are just, when you don't want to completely destroy the institution that you are protesting. You are trying to change a certain legal statute or a certain moral sentiment, but you are not trying to change the government completely. This is what the IRA was trying to do. They were trying to completely destroy the constitutional basis of Northern Ireland and at the same time reestablish its unity with the Republic of Ireland. Because of this, we can't necessarily see the IRA as participating in some kind of violent civil disobedience. It's something that is going beyond civil disobedience and going into revolution, going into rebellion, and going into something that, while may share common characteristics with violent civil disobedience, is not civil disobedience in and of itself.